I really do keep making villain decks these days. So it's probably no surprise that a lot of the decks that I make tend to be somewhat arch-enemy control-oriented decks. After all, when you're playing on a budget, you don't have the speed of some of the more expensive cards. So the way that you get around that is have decks that offer more of a control playstyle that slow the opponents down to your speed. After all of your cards are having to cost about a mana or two more than your opponents on average, so you need to be able to slow them down so that you can keep pace. Unfortunately, some of my experiments end up being a little, well, completely villainous. And the villain of the hour for today's $15 deck is Lord Xander the Collector. Though, like what usually happens when I build these, the prices fluctuate after I build them, and then it ends up being like a few cents, or in this case, like 90 cents over when it was originally quoted. Anyway, we're still gonna run with it. Lord Xander the Collector is a Grixis and 4 Vampire Demon Noble with 6 power and 6 toughness. And he's got 3 very interesting abilities. The first one says, when he enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half the cards in their hand, rounded down. Whenever he attacks, defending player mills half their library, rounded down. And whenever he dies, target player sacrifices half the non-land permanents they control, rounded down. Now, all of these abilities are super cool and interesting and unique, but what if I told you that based on how this deck is going to be operating, Lord Xander is a lie? Like, yes, this is a Lord Xander deck, but unlike Lord Xander decks that I have seen built, I am not going to be focusing on Xander at all. We are going to be focusing on a pure smokescreen strategy where Xander comes out when a player is significantly ahead and we need to knock them down a peg. But generally speaking, we will not be playing him all that often. He'll come out once or twice, and that will be fine and great, but 99% of the time, we are going to be doing stuff with the 99 of the deck. As a sidebar, decks are also more resilient when you build them that way, because when you have a commander and you lose it 5 times to board wipes and other things, if your deck can't function after that, you just don't have a good deck. That's the hill I'm going to be dying on. I am sorry. That all said, let's talk about what we are going to be doing. I said this is a Xander deck technically, so let's get that technicality out of the way. We have a couple of clones we will be using so that we can use Lord Xander's ability, but these will also be used on other cards that we have because this is a very creature-centric deck. Vizier of Many Faces becomes a copy of anything, and of course we can embalm it to get another one later on in the game. Doc's Duplicate comes down, and it is a copy of anything we have, and it gets haste and dethrone, so if we make a copy of Xander, we kill the original Xander, swing with Doc's Duplicate, getting the ability to mill somebody's library, which can have niche cases where that's necessary. Somebody casted a Vampiric Tutor in a bad time, you know the drill. Then we have Naga Fleshcrafter, which we can use to turn all of our creatures into copies of a creature. Now, granted, we can't turn them into copies of Xander because I can't read. I made a video with this in the deck, not realizing that this doesn't actually work on legendary creatures, but this will still work for plenty of other cards in our deck, and it's a basic clone in other situations, so that's not bad. But there's only 3 clones in this deck because, again, this is the smoke screen. This is the thing that our opponents are going to think we are trying to focus on, and then we're going to hit them with this section instead. This is the group discard package, and this is by and large what is far more important to what our deck is going to be doing. You see, anybody can put powerful cards on the board, but there is one place where cards are generally considered safe in a game of Commander, and that is where we are going to be striking. Our Commander already strikes several cards in our opponent's hands, but if we use cards like Arbiter of Woe, when this creature enters, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life, and we draw a card and gain 2 life, this will hit all of our opponent's stuff at the same time and give us a little bit of advantage. And he has flying, which will be important for another card we'll talk about in a second. Sidrax's Spectre makes our opponents discard a card whenever he deals combat damage to them and has Unearth. Liliana's Spectre makes everybody discard a card when she comes out and also can be used to, well, be a flyer to activate a card we'll talk about here in a second. Scythe Spectre makes every player discard a card whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent. Siren of the Silent Song makes everybody discard a card whenever it becomes untapped. And then we have the card that these evasive creatures care about. Larceny. Larceny says, whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card from their hand. So not only do our evasive creatures have the ability to force our opponents to discard on their own, but Larceny is going to make them discard even more. We also can use Raven Man to create more evasive creatures that can make our opponents discard, and he has payoff for when we make our opponents discard. He also can just make opponents discard with his -4 as well. Then we have Creeping Dread, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player, including you, will discard a card, and each opponent who discarded a card that shared a card type with what you discarded will lose 3 life. So, if there's Reanimator decks at the table, discard creatures. If there are not Reanimator decks at the table, discard any land in your hand if you want the burn to happen. Those are the cards that people are most likely to toss away to Creeping Dread. But we are not done yet. That is a rant piece. That's not what we're talking about. The next thing we're talking about is the Reanimation engine. Now, we are a deck that is very creature-centric, and if our commander does come out, we need reliable ways of getting him out. So, to that end, we have a Dread Return, a 4-mana reanimation spell that can also get rid of used-up creatures like Liliana Spectre or Raven Man tokens in order to revive another creature later in the game. Ever After can revive 2 creatures at once, and since so many of our creatures are little evasive dudes, this lets us get the most bang for our buck for the cardboard. Ayara, Widower of the Realm, has a sacrifice ability that we can use with our commander, but 9 times out of 10, we are going to be flipping her into Ayara Furnace Queen, where at the beginning of combat, every single turn, we get to reanimate a creature, give it haste, and then exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Since a lot of our creatures care about fighting and combat, Ayara is perfect for this deck. We are also going to be running an Archpriest of Shadows, a creature that has Death Touch in her own right, and can make it to where we reanimate a creature anytime the creature that this backs up punches an opponent the turn this comes out, or anytime the Archpriest of Shadows punches an opponent. Let's also throw in a Victimize. Just like Ever After, we're trying to get multiple creatures out at the same time if need be, and Sauron, Lord of the Rings, who can reanimate any creature in our graveyard and also give us a board state, since there is nothing that sucks more than draining your opponents of all of their resources and not having the ability to do enough damage to end the game. It feels like you're just kind of forcing them to play a just twisted game from the Saw franchise. That said, we also have a couple ways to make discarding hurt our opponents, and they begin with Megarum. Now, first thing about Megarum, just a tiny little story. This is not the Megarum that I was raised on. I was raised on this Megarum, and when I was a child, I actually kind of had a crush on the girl in this picture, and in hindsight, I think this is actually Seeker of Skybreak. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the clothes and the arm brands really seem like they're from Seeker of Skybreak. Like, I feel like I could be entirely incorrect here, but the outfit and the armbands and everything, and the fact that they're both blondes, it does seem like the Seeker of Skybreak is what is getting hit. And, I mean, this was created during the same era of Magic, in the same era of core sets, so it might be the correct one? I don't know. Just weird things I fixated on when I was a kid. That's all this really is. We also have a Sir Conrad the Grim, who can burn our opponents whenever they mill out creatures or throw creatures into the graveyard. Notably, this burns all of our opponents whenever they discard a creature, so if 3 opponents discard a creature and we discard a creature, all opponents are burning for 4 life, whereas Megarum is only hitting each opponent for 2 life. And that is it for the core of the deck. A lot of discard, a lot of ways to, well, a few ways to burn our opponents and close out games, a small reanimation package, and a few clones. But since this is effectively a control deck, obviously we've got some other areas that we have to focus on. But before we do that, let's talk about drawing cards. So we're going to be running an 11-card draw engine, and our draw engine is going to focus on discarding our own cards to trigger things like Sir Conrad, and making sure that we can fill our grave for our reanimation package. And the other part of the focus of our draw engine is going to be on combat, because we do have things like Larceny that we want to trigger. So in lieu of combat, we have Looter Il Core and a Wharf Infiltrator. Both of these allow us to draw and discard whenever they punch an opponent. Then we have Shadow Mage Infiltrator, which has a similar ability, but it doesn't make us discard a card, just a very solid draw engine. We can also draw and discard off of Shoreline Looter until we have 7 cards in the graveyard, and then he becomes a Shadow Mage Infiltrator, allowing us to just draw. Then we have Thought Courier and Merfolk Looter. Both of these allow us to draw and discard whenever we need, letting us filter out bad hands and get good ones. We have a high mana cost commander, so we've got 42 lands. Sometimes you just want to throw the excess lands into the graveyard. Then we have an Obsessive Stitcher, a combination of a Reanimation spell and a Merfolk Looter. This allows us to reanimate anything in our grave late game if we need to, but until then, it's a Merfolk Looter that lets us draw through our deck and discard important cards. Side note, I never get to tap this thing and activate its ability when I'm at my card shop, because I've played too many decks with Obsessive Stitcher, apparently. So people are just naturally afraid of this card when I play it, I guess. I really like being able to play some of my favorite cards in Magic the Gathering, but when I'm not allowed to do that, I guess it just shows how strong those cards are. Anyway, let's also run a Barbed Servitor, an indestructible creature with 1/1 that says if it deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card and lose 1 life. But the interesting thing about it is if our opponents don't want to give us that card, if he's ever dealt damage, an opponent loses that much life. So depending on what our opponents have for blockers, the Barbed Servitor may actually be burning our opponents a ton as they try to deny us resources. And they're very likely to try to deny us those resources because we are going to be running Bident of Thassa and Coastal Piracy, which allow us to draw cards every time our creatures deal combat damage to our opponents. Let's also throw in a Vanguard Suppressor who has Squad 2, so not only does this let us draw cards whenever we punch somebody in the throat with them, the Suppressor can also be squatted up. This makes sense because our deck has a lot of mana production. It kind of has to. Our commander costs 7. This will be another mana sink for all of that extra mana. And that does it for the not the removal package. What am I doing? I am completely out of my mind. The draw package of the deck. That's what happens when your girlfriend walks in as you're recording a video. That's I'm distracted. That is all that is. Anyway, let's talk about removal. Now, we are a control deck, and that is why we are going to be running a 12-card removal and interaction package on top of our blowing up of opponents' hands that we are going to be doing. And each of these cards is aimed at either protecting us or hitting every single opponent in some way, shape, or form, or hitting a niche that our deck normally sucks at. So in that niche, we have a Feed the Swarm, because we don't really have a way to get rid of enchantments in these colors very easily. And we have a Hostage Taker, because it gives us access to exile in a non-white deck. Also, stealing an opponent's creature and casting it is a very fun play. Then to protect ourselves, we have a Refute and a Negate to protect our board state and ourselves. These counter spells double as really, really effective ways to thwart our opponents. Counter wars are great, but the big thing with Refute is that it allows us to draw and discard, letting us throw away expensive cards like, say, Vile Mutilator or Dusk Mangler that begin the let's hit everybody all at once style of cards. Dusk Mangler is one of my personal favorites. It comes into the battlefield, making every opponent sack a creature, discard a card, and lose 4 life. That is 6 cards worth of advantage in your favor, and a little bit of burn while also having a 5/4 body. Just make sure that you don't cast this, just reanimate it, just trust me. Then we have Mild Mutilator, which makes every opponent lose a non-token enchantment and a non-token creature. And again, just like Dusk Mangler, it has a sack cost when we try to summon it, so just summon this with Reanimation. Trust me, you will be very happy when you do. Demon's Disciple, Accursed Marauder, and Plague Crafter are all our flesh bags that allow us to make our opponents sacrifice a bunch of creatures when they come out. Then we have Eldest Reborn, which does the same and has a Reanimation clause later and a group discard clause. Rankle, Master of Pranks, can make our opponents discard cards as well and force our opponents to sacrifice creatures. Just all around great, wonderful effects that go with what our deck is doing. And Dark Intimations, another way to do group discard that also allows us to force our opponents to sacrifice creatures or planeswalkers as well. And then it allows us to get back a creature or planeswalker from our graveyard and then draw a card afterwards. So let me go ahead and let this be clear. For 5 mana, we get to get rid of 6 cards. We get to draw a card and then get a creature back, meaning that this is a cantrip that also puts a creature into our hand, letting us go +1 and making all of our opponents go -2 each. That's effectively +7 in card advantage for us. That's an insane just tempo shift in any matchup. But we're not done here. We are also running a singular board wipe in Necromantic Selection, blows up all creatures, and then reanimates a creature from any graveyard that was thrown there with Necromantic Selection. Now, because commanders are sent to the graveyard as a state-based action, there is a time where you can rip those commanders away from your opponent with Necromantic Selection. Once upon a time, commanders going to the command zone was a replacement effect, and this meant that they didn't work with certain dies, triggers, but because it is a state-based action now, Necromantic Selection is able to worm its way in there and steal a commander before it goes to the command zone. So, always remember that when you're figuring out which target to get back with Necromantic Selection. That all said, we need to talk about ramp next, so that's what we're going to do. And here we are with a 14-card ramp package because we are playing such an expensive commander. And let's begin. We have a Burnished Heart. This allows us to sacrifice it to get 2 basic lands from the deck onto the battlefield tapped. Burnished Heart is not a great card in most decks, but here our commander costs so much, and it's just kind of perfect for what our deck is trying to do. Let's also throw in a sad robot. We are going to be the archenemy, so let's make sure we have a creature that can block for us and give us card advantage when it does. We can also sack it with things like Ayara if we need to, and a Wayfarer's Bauble is another way to grab basic lands from the deck. All of these cards give us the best chance of having lands that we will not lose later in the game. Everything else is a bit of a risk. I'm talking Hedron Archive, Firemind Vessel, Sisay's Ring, Golem's Eye, Ichor Elixir, and, well, all of these tap for 2 mana, but they cost 4 mana. Really good rate of return because most of these come into play untapped, not counting the Firemind Vessel, but these do have the negative effect of being rocks, so they're easy to target. We're also running a couple 2-mana rocks. We have Sky Diamond and Charcoal Diamond. We're not running the Fire Diamond because our deck is low on red creatures. Then we have an Honored Heirloom. We are making our opponents discard cards, so it is in our best effort to have a mana rock that allows us to get rid of people's graveyards. That Stonespeaker Crystal can also get rid of people's graveyards as well, so remember you have access to this. While it's a great Hedron Archive alternative, it can also get rid of graveyards. That will protect us from Schadenfreude if our opponents decide to start summoning all of their favorite cards, and they just kind of look at our suffering and delight in the glee. Then we have Worn Powerstone, a 3-mana rock that can tap for 2, and Everflowing Chalice, which is a 2-mana rock, or a 4-mana rock, or a 6-mana rock, or I don't see anybody in their right mind paying 8 mana for this thing, but, you know, Everflowing Chalice, it does everything. Use it in your decks. Trust me, it's good. Then for lands, we are running 2 mountains, 3 islands, and 7 swamps. We are also running 5 Dimir lands, a Temple of Deceit as our only tapped land, with Tainted Isle, River of Tears, Choked Estuary, and Sunken Hollow being our other lands. For Izzet, we are running Ferris Lake, Frostboil Snarl, and Temple of Epiphany, and for our Rakdos lands, we have the Temple of Malice, Shadowblood Ridge, Foreboding Ruins, Smoldering Marsh, and Tainted Peak. For our Omni lands, we are running Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, and then the Suite of Thriving Lands, as well as a Path of Ancestry. The path is only because it allows us to scry, and it does get all of our deck's colors, and we have a lot of low mana looters we want to get out early, so if we have access to all of our colors as early as possible, we take that access. Also, because our deck is so heavy on lands, we are also going to be running Forgotten Cave, Lonely Sandbar, and Barren Moor, because these can be cycled to replace themselves if we get mana clumps. Let's also put a Rogue's Passage in. The opportunity cost is very low on this, and Pit of Offerings as the budget Bojuka Bog, since somehow Bojuka Bog is still not within the budget limitations of decks like these. I don't even know how that happens. Then for our fetching lands, we are running an Escape Tunnel, an Evolving Wilds, a Terramorphic Expanse. All of these can crack themselves to get whatever land we need out of the deck. Myriad Landscape can crack itself to get 2 lands out of the deck. Ash Barrens can crack itself in our hand to get whatever land we want out of the deck. And Seething Landscape is the best brainchild of Terramorphic Expanse, and, well, Ash Barrens, I guess. It's just got regular cycling. It's basically what happens if a real Triome and an Evolving Wilds had a baby. It comes into play untapped like an Evolving Wilds, but it can tap for mana like a Triome. It can cycle for 3 mana like a Triome, but it can sacrifice itself to get the basic lands our deck needs like an Evolving Wilds. Seething Landscape is fantastic, and every time you're playing a 3-color deck, if you don't have access to strong fetches, using landscape fetches is great. Also, even for my own full power decks, I limit myself to only 3 fetches in my deck's colors, so I tend to use a landscape fetch as the 4th fetch in those decks. So even in full power builds, where I have access to real fetch lands, I still use landscapes. I still think they're fantastic. But that does it for the entirety of the deck. We are not done with the video, though. Now we need to talk about how to actually play this thing. Looking at our opening hand, we have all 3 thriving lands. This is the first hand that came out of this, and a Worn Power Stone. I'm okay keeping this hand because it has all of our colors, it has early ramp, and it has a Liliana's Spectre, so we have a great play we can make as well. So let's open up with our draw. There's a Rankled Master of Pranks. I'm already feeling good about this hand. So we have double black here. Let's go ahead and put Thriving Moor down first and say that it can tap for Dimir colors. Next turn comes up. We have a Dusk Mangler. That is fantastic. We're going to be able to make use of that here soon. Let's throw the Thriving Bluff down and say that it can tap for Rakdos colors. And then let's move on to turn 3, where we get a Necromantic Selection. Let's go ahead and play a Swamp. It's early enough in the game that people have plenty of cards in their hand, so we're just going to drop down the Liliana's Spectre to make everybody discard a card in their hands. They've got plenty of cards. This isn't going to put a target on our back just yet, but we look at the Vanguard Suppressor as our next card. I played this turn wrong. Oops, I should not have done that. You know what? We're just going to tap 3, and we are going to play the Worn Power Stone. And then we are going to play the Thriving Isle. I should have listened to my gut and played the Worn Power Stone last turn. I did not get to play the stronger play this turn because I made that mistake. So that is entirely on me. I take the punishment for that. Thriving Isle, it's going to tap for Dimir colors, and we're just going to move on to the next turn. We have an island. I wish I would have had the untapped land. This is the side effect of playing a deck that is 3-color while also being a budget deck. But it's fine. We will make do. So we have access to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have access to 7 lands. Screw it. Let's just go ahead and play Xander. Boom. He's out early is not what I was planning on doing. I was planning on playing Rankle and getting Dusk Mangler out. I feel like I would have gotten way more value out of that, but we're here with Lord Xander now, so we'll just run with it. Moving to turn 6, let's play a Ferris Lake, and our opponents have likely played lots of creatures, so here's what we are gonna do. We are going to swing Lord Xander at the player who is not playing Reanimator. We're going to mill half their library. It's fine. We're not too worried about taking guff from that. Then we are going to reset all the players on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's play Necromantic Selection. Necromantic Selection is going to blow up everything on the board, and it's going to resummon our Lord Xander. Now, we are going to choose Lord Xander to get rid of the permanents on whichever player is playing a non-green deck with lots of artifact ramp. We are going to choose that player because we can set them back further than anybody else. If a player in that situation is not available, we've knocked out all the creatures, so we're going to go for, say, the Enchantress player, whichever player has the most non-creature permanents on the board, as we just wiped the creature permanents out of the game. So, we move on to turn 7. Unfortunate that it has to be this way. We made mistakes. That is fine. Let's go ahead and play Rankle. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is the Rankle Spankle, and we're going to swing at our opponents. Now, Rankle allows us to make everybody discard a card, and make everybody sacrifice a creature. We already set everybody back really hard. Let's make everybody sacrifice a creature. Let's throw away Lord Xander, and let's discard Dusk Mangler. This gets rid of a huge amount of resources from our opponents, and we're not going to allow them to draw cards to replace them. We're fine with that because we have a Vanguard Suppressor in our hand. It's unlikely we're going to have to negate something, but if somebody tries to get rid of our graveyard, we will have to negate that. We're basically banking on an opponent not having a Bojuka Bog at this point. We open our turn, we play Swamp, and let's go ahead and pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's play Ever After. This is very likely to get counterspelled, so we're going to pay 2 and negate the counterspell. Ever After is going to summon Dust Mangler, getting rid of 6 permanents, and summon the Lord Xander, getting rid of cards in our opponent's hands too. So what you want to do is you want to have Lord Xander target the opponent with the most cards in their hand, and make sure that his effect goes on the stack above Dust Mangler. So choose Dust Mangler to happen first, then have Lord Xander happen afterwards, which will actually make Lord Xander happen first, because that's how the stack works. You declare, hey, part 1 of the stack is Dust Mangler, part 2 of the stack is going to be Lord Xander's ability. They both happen at the same time, that's just the order that you're letting them resolve. Then you swing with the Rankle, and let's go ahead and make everybody sacrifice a creature again. We can just get rid of our Dust Mangler. We don't need anything else. And it's unlikely our opponents have cards in their hands, so that's where we're going to be. We are going to move on to the next turn. That's a Sky Diamond. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4... 1, 2, 1, 2. And we are going to do Vanguard Suppressor cloned twice. And then we are going to swing our Rankle at somebody, sacrificing our commander. We are going to, again, throw our commander's ability at whichever opponent has non-creature permanents they have played. Whichever one of them is playing, like, a Blink deck with a bunch of teleportation circle style effects. Whoever happens to be running that, they are the target for the Lord Xander forced sacrifice ability here. Then, when we move on to our next turn, we have a Vile Mutilator. Let's go ahead and make our opponents lose even more valuable resources. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Vile Mutilator comes out. We can sacrifice one of our Vanguard Suppressors. We are wiping out more of our opponent's boards. And then we are swinging with Rankle and everything else. Now, people likely don't have very many cards in their hands. If they have 1 card in their hand, then we're going to let Rankle discard those cards and then draw cards. So we're going to discard card and then draw 1, 2... We're only going to draw 2, because we're not letting Rankle draw cards. We don't need Rankle to draw cards. Then we're going to pay 2 and play Raven Man. And with Raven Man, we get to make a bird token because players did discard cards this turn. And for our land for the turn, we can play Temple of Deceit, showing that we have a Smoldering Marsh, and we don't need that, so we're going to throw it to the bottom of the deck. Now, we've basically won. Like, yes, our opponents are still playing the game, but in terms of how the game's going to work, we open up our turn, we can use Raven Man to just make our opponents lose a card in their hand. And, I mean, hell, even if we hadn't drawn what we just did, we just drew Sauron. We can just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can play Sauron. Sauron is going to reanimate the Dust Mangler. That's going to make our opponents lose another creature, lose 4 life each, lose a card in their hand each. Raven Man is going to see that. He's going to make a bird token at the end of the turn. Rankle is going to swing at everybody, making them all discard a card. Yep. Combat damage, make everybody discard a card, choose not to have everybody draw cards. We'll make everybody lose a creature as well, because we'll just sacrifice the bird token we made with Raven Man, and then we draw 2 cards from the Vanguard Suppressors, and that means we have a land in our hand. Let's play the Island, and then let's cycle the Forgotten Cave that is in our hand. I forgot to mention we had utility lands. Sorry, I'll go back and fix that in the edit. So we're cycling away the Forgotten Cave in order to draw a card. It's a River of Tears. Sometimes you just hit extra lands. That's entirely fine. But you see where we're at right now, right? Like, our opponents are bereft of trading cards. We just get to keep on hurting them. Let's use the Raven Man and make everybody lose more cards in their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We don't have the mana to play Lord Xander again. We don't need to play Lord Xander again. We just keep on operating with our board as it is, drawing extra cards. Hell, there's a Victimize. Do we have a thing in our grave that we want to summon with Victimize? No, because this is a game that's being played against imaginary opponents, and they haven't wiped our board yet. Assuming that they didn't discard their board wipes, which has happened in games I've been in. Anyway, that does it for how to play the deck, so I guess the next logical thing is, what would you do to upgrade this monstrosity? If you are upgrading this deck, I would suggest finding room for Rakdos Charm and Drown in the Loch. These not only benefit from our opponents having more cards in their graveyard, but these cards help protect us from being just victims of our own hubris. Drown in the Loch can counter a reanimation spell or kill the creature that was reanimated, and Rakdos Charm can just stop our opponents from reanimating creatures altogether, since we are handing them all kinds of powerful cards. Let's also put in a Vandal Blast because we are the archenemy, so getting rid of everything that our opponents have in the artifacts is a great way to set them back. Also, sometimes you just can't get rid of enough cards with Xander himself. Then, let's make sure that our ramp is a little more powerful. Relic of Sauron is a great upgrade to the deck, and Thran Dynamo is the exact kind of ramp our deck is looking for. And if we are adding these ramps into the deck, there's some cards that cost a lot of mana that these can help us cast that I highly suggest you put in. Because we're playing an archenemy deck, there is no better archenemy than Nicol Bolas himself. God Pharaoh can make every opponent exile 2 cards from their hand with one of his effects, so he's already prime material for our deck. The OG Nicol Bolas can take every card away from our opponent's hands. Nicol Bolas the Ravager can make everybody discard a card when he comes out, and of course we can flip him into Nicol Bolas the Arisen, who has the ability to let us just draw extra cards or reanimate creatures, letting us always have a powerful board presence. Then Nicol Bolas Dragon God, a much harder to cast card than anything else on this list, just based on its pipping, but Nicol Bolas Dragon God has the ability to blow up creatures or planeswalkers, or let us just draw a card and force every opponent to exile a card from their hand or a permanent they control. These types of omnipresent removal effects are exactly what the deck wants to use, and Nicol Bolas Dragon God does these in spades. Let's also add in some better reanimation, like the original Reanimate, and a Breach the Multiverse. Breach is fantastic here because sometimes your opponents are throwing away cards in hopes of reanimating them with their discard that we are forcing them to do. Playing Breach the Multiverse will allow us to capitalize on their reanimation targets instead of them. Then let's also add in Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves because we have a lot of creatures that want to be able to deal damage to our opponents, so let's make sure that they have the haste to do so. These can also provide hexproof to things like Nicol Bolas and, Nicol Bolas, just in case we need that when we are upgrading the deck. Though giving hexproof to Lord Xander is again a bit of a smokescreen. We don't need Xander to have hexproof. He's just going to exist on the board and then die, and that's perfectly fine. That all said, I hope you end up enjoying this deck when you play it, and I hope your friends end up telling you that they don't want you to watch any more of my videos because you get too many terrible ideas when you watch them. I think that would be a win-win for both of us. But you know what would be a win-win for me? If you were to support my channel by checking out my streams Monday through Thursday in the evenings. I also have a channel where I talk about current events that matter to me. I also have a Fourth Wall shop where you can get this lovely playmat if you want to support me this way. And I have Patreon if you want to support me that way as well. And if you are a patron and you have a deck of yours that you want me to look at to upgrade, give me a price, give me the parameters for the deck, and I will try my best to work within those parameters like I did with the Savra deck. That all said, I also have a Blue Sky just in case you want to support me over there, where I let you guys know when I'm going live on streams and if I'm going to be anywhere specific throughout my state, which can matter for protests and stuff that I've been doing, but also might matter if you want to get a game in of Magic somewhere in the Atlanta area. That all said, thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you being here, and as always, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Leela Uraraka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.